Welcome and thank you for joining us for our 15th episode of YCP's virtual monthly series, Refiner's Fire. It's hard to believe we're on episode number 15 here together. Every month, Catholic business leaders from diverse industries share their professional and spiritual wisdom in short 30-minute segments. In spite of the short length of these segments, we hope these tips and insights are so powerful for you and all of us as we work in witness for Christ this year. The name of our micro interview series, Refiner's Fire, actually comes from scripture, from Malachi chapter 3, verse 2, where we learn that God is, quote, like refiner's fire, who seeks to purify us and make us the best we can be. And that's really the whole point of this series. Through the inspiration and wisdom of these exceptional Catholic leaders, we're challenged to improve in small ways in our professional and spiritual lives. So let's be open to this journey of refinement so that in everything we do, we can aim for that higher standard of excellence that gives glory to God. Our topic this month is from doer to leader. The most significant transition of any professional will go through is the transition from being a doer to being a leader of doers. Yet too often we're romanced by the rewards of promotion, and we often have little understanding of the responsibilities of leadership. Those of us with deep roots in the Catholic faith and concern for the eternal well-being of others have a secret weapon as leaders. And so I can't think of a better person to speak on this topic than Dave Geenans. Dave is an associate professor in the School of Business at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. He also serves as the assistant director of the Byron G. Thompson Center for Integrity in Finance and Economics. He has extensive experience, having served as CEO of 3 different mid-sized companies, and he's written 4 books on faith and leadership. Dave, it's so great to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much, Peter, for having me. I look forward to it.
Excellent. Well, just a reminder to our audience, Dave and I will do some Q&A here now. Be thinking of your questions. You can actually type them into the chat wherever you're watching this on the different platforms. Type those questions in. We'll take a few of them towards the end of the segment. So Dave, let's talk about this topic of doer to leader. Why is this so important for YCP members, and why is this really a passion of yours?
Well, I went through the transition, so I've got firsthand knowledge of what it's like to be efficient and an effective technical person. And I gather those of you on this stream are in a profession or in business, whether that's nursing or whether that's teaching or whether that's accounting or whether that's a lawyer. And you're likely achieving some level of success, which is based upon what I would consider your technical competency. Otherwise, you wouldn't be employed. And at some point, some of you have already gone through this transition, you're going to have an opportunity, most likely, to lead other technically competent people. And here's the way it works in most professions. They take the most technically competent, the best of the best, and they say, boy, I sure wish we could duplicate that person. And they get promoted. They get promoted to a box in an org chart called manager. And now their role changes because what brought them to success, the technical competency, is less important now than how do you get work done with and through other people. The skill sets are entirely different. So this transition is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And this is how, just generally in corporate America, this has happened in the past. And it seems like technical competency, as you put it, is enough to get promoted. But what else might be necessary?
And just building off of what you said earlier too, is that we do this in corporate America all the time, and we wonder why we lack leadership in our enterprises. So I want to address one more thing on technical competency before I dive into leadership and what else is required, because there's something that accompanies us as Christians and as Catholics that's really important. Our technical competency should be at least on par with the best of those we work with. Work is honorable, work is dignified, but we also have a motivation that's very different than other people. We are asked and taught in our faith to work as if working for Christ. So we have a motivation, because if we want to get promoted to that opportunity for leadership, we have to continue to increase that technical competency. So that's a prerequisite for getting the opportunity simply to lead. So look for that opportunity, but prepare yourself to continue to do well in the job that you're doing. then you can step into the leadership role.
Yeah, and this fits so well with YCP's mission, bridging our professional lives and our faith and making sure it's an integrated experience in our life and not something that we put in separate boxes. Never the two shall meet.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically what's required to be a successful leader beyond the skills that could potentially just get us promoted.
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to first caution everybody on this stream that if you listen to what the world says and what honestly a lot of authors say about leadership, the concept of leadership has been what I would say co-opted and diluted. Things like everybody is a leader or leading. I lead because I lead by example. The fact is, not everybody is a leader, and nor is leading by example leadership. Leading by example is self-discipline, and anybody can lead, but not everybody's a leader. Many choose not to do it. And one of the reasons they choose not to do it is they don't feel competent enough to do it as a leader. So now we're going to start to talk about not so much your technical competency, but what I call your cooperative competency. And it's a set of tools that you have to develop. But you don't know quite where to go until you understand leadership at its foundation. And I would direct you to the Bible, the Old Testament, in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 says this: two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. Another translation says good reward for their toil. So if you just take that at face value, two are better than one, and isn't reward for our toil and return for our work something that we're interested in as individuals and as people who need to provide for our families? And guess what? Your business or profession is interested in the same thing. So there's no friction between what I would call the biblical foundation for leadership, which is found in Ecclesiastes 4:9, and what we are called to in the marketplace as our vocation. So the issue then becomes, how do we ensure that two are in fact better than one? Because when two people don't cooperate, two can actually be worse than one. My guess is you might have had some experiences in that in some way, shape, or form. So this idea of leadership being the art of optimizing cooperation starts to govern our walk as Christians and as Catholics in our professional marketplace. Again, leadership is the art of optimizing cooperation. So how do I get other people to commit more fully and willingly to the work? It's no longer about my effectiveness and my efficiency and my technical competency. Those things still come to play. It's how do I increase the competency of everybody else and them working together, because that's how the rewards and the return actually get multiplied. So the key here is to improve our cooperative competency.
And I know there's some people that are probably thinking, well, do I have to have a title in order to practice this cooperative competency? Could you speak to that briefly? I mean, I think that's kind of the reverse of the question you brought up about getting promoted because of a skill set versus being prepared to actually lead.
Certainly not. Anybody you read and anybody who's practiced leadership knows you don't have to have the position, but let's not deny the fact that the position is an assist. It helps. It gives you legitimate authority to do these things. But you can practice your cooperative competency anytime within a team where you're not the manager and you're helping, or you're not the head nurse in an ICU unit and you're taking care of patients. You can influence other people and get people to work together. But think for just a second. It's all about how you carry yourself that causes people to want to work together. And that starts to hint at some of those cooperative competency issues that are so critically important beyond your technical competency.
So what would you say? Is there anything else you'd add in terms of enhancing our cooperative competency? Maybe some practicals or some recommendations that you'd have, whether we're in a leadership, kind of title-based leadership position now, or if it's more of a peer-to-peer leadership we can offer. What would you recommend in terms of really enhancing that cooperative competency for us as professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you can read literally thousands of books on leadership and learn what to do. And that's a bit problematic because where we have to start is who we are, because that's, by the way, is our secret weapon as Christians and Catholics. Who are we? We are made in the likeness and image of God. We're created in the likeness and image of God, as is everybody else we work with. As hard as perhaps maybe you don't want to admit that, because perhaps there's some stress there or some tension there. But who we are is what matters, because our employees, when you move into a leadership position or you take on that mantle of leadership with or without the promotion, it's all about your way of being that people respond to. It's not about your behavior. Now, certainly people see behavior and that strikes a chord with them to either commit more fully to the work or less fully to the work. But the core of that behavior is your way of being. Well, we have the magic, we have the formula. We're created in the likeness and image of God, as is everybody else. So our way of being should be this. There's two choices. You can treat people as people, or you can treat people as objects or means to an end. In business, we suffer from this dominant ideology that has weighed heavily on us over the last 5 decades, that the purpose of business is to maximize wealth or profit. Think about that. Is that going to prompt you or ask you to treat people as objects or people as people? Now we start to get some tension. We start to get some friction. If you want to be a successful leader, because two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil, you need to treat people as people. And that's exactly what we know about our faith. Everyone is created in the likeness and image of God. So that's critically important.
Yeah, really good point, Dave. And I'm just going to remind our audience here that we are going to turn here shortly to some questions from you all. So feel free to type into the comments or the chat section on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll draw some of those questions up on the screen. So be thinking, be typing. Good. Well, as we turn to one of our final 2 questions here. Firstly, Dave, I just want to ask you, these books you've written, is there maybe one of them that you'd recommend in particular to our audience today? Maybe one that touches on this concept or is at least parallel to this idea of cooperative competency?
Yes, there is. And thank you, Peter. You can find my latest book, Truth in the Transcendent Business, on Amazon. It also is in audiobook form. It's about a 200-page book. I'll tell you now, it's not an easy read. We talk about economics, we talk about Frederick Hayek, and we integrate Catholic teaching, because even Adam Smith, the economist known for free markets, had a lot to say about what the church says will happen if you have free markets without virtue. And when we think about optimizing cooperation, the virtue that we pursue as Christian and Catholics is paramount in becoming effective leaders. So I'd recommend that book.
Excellent. So moving to our final question here, what are some practical steps our YCP audience can take as we either prepare to be leaders or grow into a leadership role that perhaps we're already in today?
Absolutely. So again, just continue to grow deep in your faith so that you recognize who you are, not so much what you do, who you are and who other people are. That's critical. But Patrick Lencioni, in his book, The Advantage, talks about how organizational health trumps everything. And he differentiates in his book between leaders being smart and healthy. It's a duality. Smart refers to your technical competency. Healthy refers to your leadership or cooperative competency. So practically, we want to get healthy. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, one, are you able to trust other people? Because leadership is going to be a really difficult ride if you don't trust others, because you're going to start to micromanage. You're going to put lid on people's potential, and that doesn't allow them to flourish. So healthy means being able to trust people first, even at the risk of potential damage control. Another option for healthy would be, are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you you may be the most technically competent in your field, but that actually hurts you because you tend not to invite other people's opinions or other people's answers. Are you comfortable not being the smartest person in the room? Because leadership has a very broad canopy of coverage. The odds, if you become a CEO, I can guarantee you are not the most technically competent person in the room. Can you admit that and say, I need help? I want your expertise. I want your brain. I want more than just your muscle and your brawn and your hands and your feet. I want your heart and your head into this business or into this profession. Another example, Again, if you're technically competent, are you willing to put your ego in your pocket? Because so many leaders, they try to take the work away and impress people. So, step aside, young man or young woman, let me take the gears and let me show you what a real expert does. That's a disastrous move if you want people to cooperate with you. So I think you get the idea. Those are some of the practical things on getting healthy that will allow you to become a better leader and fully integrate your Christian and Catholic faith to your workplace.
And Dave, there's probably a huge amount of prayer, and I know often prayer involved in this whole process, right? And
Amen.
also finding time for that silence, the opportunity to reflect on yourself, uh, both in your leadership role, in our faith, how we're developing ourselves, so that we can really be able to channel the Holy Spirit's guidance as leaders, right? Because being vulnerable with others, I can imagine, probably first requires us to be vulnerable to ourselves. And I'm just thinking now, in a sense, be vulnerable to God. Obviously, He knows everything already, but us sort of acknowledging the fact that He already knows us completely, right? We're made in His image. He knows us completely. So, any final thoughts on that before we take a question from our audience in terms of prayer, faith, and vulnerability?
I love what you just said about the Holy Spirit and being vulnerable to God. But I also, and I pray this for my children all the time, is that pray for a greater impact. We only walk this planet once, okay? We're called to our professional vocation, just as people who are religious are called to their vocations. Take full advantage of it. Pray to have a greater impact. But again, you have to prepare your heart, prepare your mind, prepare your soul to love one another literally at work, because that's what makes a difference. And that's not soft necessarily. Your parents loved you and it wasn't always kind and gentle, okay? But that praying and protecting you, pray to protect you from evil, is such a critical prayer, because Satan hates the fact that we're actually having this discussion online and trying to impart our faith and our work into the marketplace. So I would just add that.
Let's turn to some questions from our audience. So we'll get our first question up here on the screen from Joe. How do you recommend dealing with micromanagement at work? Thanks for the question, Joe.
Yeah, so if you're being I assume, Joe, you're being micromanaged. So you know how uncooperative that can feel. It's just this weight and this person. Uh, I would try to look and talk to your boss, if they're the one micromanaging you. Talk about the need to have freedom, the need to experiment a little bit. I don't know what the culture in your workplace is, but culture are the norms, the invisible, unspoken, and unwritten norms that govern behaviors. But if you start to verbalize perhaps a different culture, well, can I be trusted to do some things that are off the radar, or on the fringes of the radar, or off the beaten path? Do I have the freedom to do that so that I can enhance value at my enterprise? Is a great conversation. But there's probably a reason that person is micromanaging you. Could be trust, could be not willing to share power or give away power. And so I think enhancing trust, if anything you can do to enhance trust with that person, would perhaps pull the reins off if they're micromanaging you. So I think I would start there.
Really good points, Dave. And if I could just add to that, there can also be sometimes, from a manager's perspective, maybe a lack of visibility into your progress on projects or tasks. And so I wonder if you could also maybe just take a step back and consider, is my manager, in a sense, stepping in for all these little moments, or with all these kind of questions about minutia, because they aren't aware of what my progress is? And is there any way I can show progress more proactively? In a sense, you'd be kind of getting ahead of the game, and perhaps over time, your manager would start to see, yes, this is a great avenue to see where Joe is on this project. So rather than having to step in and ask questions about the details, I can see the progress tracked in whatever format is appropriate for your industry and business. So I think, Dave, it's kind of an extension of that trust component. In a sense, you're building trust with your manager by being proactive to provide visibility into the status of your work.
Absolutely. Over one of the greatest ways to improve trust is to over communicate. And you mentioned proactivity. Absolutely agree.
Great. Let's turn to another question from our audience. From Brenda, how can one cultivate trust if you've seen potential red flags and lack of cooperation from others?
Wow. These are such easy questions. um, and that's why I started with the whole get healthy with trust thing, because of all the things you can do, trust is such an important piece of it. Um, I would liken it to, what do you do with your kids when you lose trust in them? Now I'm old enough; I've got grown kids, but what did I do with them to help them build trust back with me? Right? Over communicate would be one of those things. Um, you have to Part of the time you have to speak it into being. I mean, part of the role of the leader, and whether that's position based leader or the simply taking the mantle of leadership, is to clarify the culture, make those norms that govern behavior spoken, written, and visible, because the culture are the invisible, unspoken, and written norms. So when you verbalize it, now people start to think, oh, are we supposed to trust one another? And then literally, you have to generate a conversation around trust. Most of us are so busy at work, well, we don't even talk about trust. We just whisper at the water cooler about, oh my gosh, we don't trust one another, or there's this heavy culture. Start a conversation about it, and start a conversation about what you want. And I'm sure you're not the only one, because working in a trusting environment allows so much freedom, so much agility, all of which benefits the enterprise. But understand that the reason somebody's not trusting is that they've probably got a burden. They've probably been harmed. They've trusted and got burned. And that's the definition of what I would call unhealthy. So they might need some help, literally, maybe just some love and care and compassion, and maybe some honest and transparent speaking to say, look, if the fact that you don't trust people, I get and I understand it. If I were in your shoes, I understand the obstacle, but it's so important that you do, because it's killing everybody around you. Can we have an adult conversation about it?
Dave, you brought up Pat Lencioni and his book, The Advantage. I'd also recommend The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and the pyramid of that is built. The image that he builds is this pyramid of the five dysfunctions and our responses for how we can kind of root out those dysfunctions. And I'm sure you remember this, but for our audience, trust is that foundational building block. You can't build any of the other components of a high functioning team without trust. So another recommendation for a book to look at.
Absolutely.
It could be helpful.
Yep.
Good. Move on to our next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Move on to our next question here from Chris. Chris says, excited to read your book. Dave, what advice do you have on finding coaches or mentors that can guide you to success in your professional life and sharing the same values and virtues of our faith?
Well, there are a lot of executive type enterprises around the United States, that bring like-minded and Christian people together to share business issues and also share life together, pray for one another, disciple one another. Convene comes to mind. Christian Businessmen's Connection also comes to mind. CBMC. I'm a member of that group. Um, you'll find a lot of like-minded people who struggle with the same things we as Christians do. It's really hard to get beyond the dominant ideology and some of the economic presuppositions. So I would definitely recommend those. Any of Patrick Lencioni's books. Obviously, he's a great, strong Catholic. His last one is The Motive, is another great resource for you. But I think you'll find mentors in Convene, or you'll find members in Acumen is another one, ACUMEN, Acumen. CBMC are all resources for you. My guess too, is people are reluctant to share their faith at work. And let me give you some really advice that helped me. And I don't know where it came from. I'll attribute it to God. But everybody's so sensitive about offending somebody about your faith. And I'm not suggesting proselytizing at work. What I am suggesting is being held accountable for your faith. In other words, let people know what your faith is, and ask, I want to be held accountable for the tenets of my faith. And somebody may say, well, what are the tenets of your faith? Well, there's a door. It's like, okay, you want to know about those so they can hold you accountable. There's nothing discriminatory about being held accountable for your own faith. And what you'll find is 80% of the other people you work with are probably Christian too, perhaps even Catholic, and they were just waiting for somebody to kind of wave their hand and go, "Hey, let's talk to one another. Let's mentor one another. How do we do this? All for the benefit of everyone here, for the not only for the earthly benefit of our companies and our enterprises and our professions and our families, but for our salvation of everybody." So you've got friends in your corner right where you work.
And I would just add, Dave, we also have an executive mentorship program for our paying YCP members, which is one of the core benefits here at Young Catholic Professionals. So, Chris, you can email us at membership@youngcatholicprofessionals.org. We'll do whatever we can to help you get matched up. We have mentors across the country, some of them even willing to meet virtually, if you're maybe not in a YCP city today. So we can help you with that. Just shoot us an email and the team will be in touch with you.
And I am on the mentor list, so I'd love to connect with you.
There we go. Great. All right. We have time for one final question here from our audience. From Jensen, what tips do you have for someone who wants to grow into a management role without having prior management experience?
Well, you're in the right place to come here, listen to this. What you want to start to think about is getting work done beyond what you do. Now, again, that doesn't require any formal education, but it does require practice, whether that's with your friends or whether that's with a project for a not-for-profit or whether that's in your parish and you're going to lead a group of people. So you can practice those tool sets. And there's a lot of tool sets, but again, it begins with who you are, as we first talked about. But strategic thinking is one of the things, to step out of yourself, look at the work as a whole, and think about, why are we doing it? What is it we're trying to accomplish? What are our objectives? What are our strategies? So find a mentor. I think it's a great idea. YCP is a wonderful resource for that. And just start to take it step by step. People are born with traits that maybe lend themselves better for leadership, but the way it's been co-opted by the greater culture, most people have no idea what it is. Now you know what it is. It's about optimizing cooperation. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for the toil. Just start that practice. You'll get better, and when you get better, you'll be confident or competent, and when you get competent, you'll be confident, and when those opportunities present themselves, you can raise your hand and say, I would love to have that opportunity.
One other thing to consider, Jensen, is that those elevated to leadership positions often do have the ability to deeply understand the challenges that your business or team or business unit perhaps is encountering in the marketplace. So I think insofar as you can really understand what the biggest challenges are, and I think you can just ask questions of your teammates, maybe your manager, you can then start to think about, is there any small thing that I can do to show that I understand these business problems and can start to help to address them in creative or strategic ways? Because I think what a manager would love to see is someone on his or her team who really understands what the business is going through and is really showing that they're proactive and strategic in how they think about addressing that problem. Even if you don't have the answers, I think about the ability to show that you understand where the business is today is a good starting place. And then perhaps there is some small project or some additional work you can take on your team that will allow you to play out what you've learned about the business. Something else to consider.
Yeah, very good.
Excellent. Well, Dave, it has been such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you for your insights and guidance. I know I've benefited from it. I know our whole audience has as well. And it's great to still have you plugged in there in YCP Kansas City and have you as a mentor as well. So thank you again, Dave, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Peter.